This is episode 55 of the Marshall Street Podcast.
You're listening to the Marshall Street Podcast, the home of music industry know-how that will give you the skills to take your career to the next level. Here are your hosts, Bennett Ferguson and Stu Watts. What's going on? Welcome back to the Marshall Street Podcast. Today's topic is all about how to hone your skills as an engineer. Recording engineer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer. All of these are slightly different, but the same principles apply. So we're going to go into a bit of a discussion about, some of the things that you need to get started.
Yep.
Some advice that I have as an engineer, how I started.
Yep. Some tips and tricks from your journey along the way.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks again for checking us out. If you like this content, please share it around.
Yep. If anyone you know is wanting to get into the music industry, they've said that they want to start recording or, mixing is an interest to them, share this with them, get this information in front of them. That's how we can share it around.
Absolutely.
Now, to kick things off, do you want to run us through the differences in all the engineers you just mentioned? A
Sure.
recording engineer to a mix engineer to a mastering engineer, for those who might not know that there are these different roles?
Yep, absolutely. So recording engineer, first of all, is the person who hits record and sets up all the microphones and knows the gear back to front of how to capture all of the music or anything like that might come through a studio.
So that's a lot of microphone knowledge.
Microphone knowledge, preamps, technology in terms of like physical technology.
Yep.
So like
Gear.
mic cables, electricity.
Guitars, different guitar sounds, different guitar amps, different guitar heads, tones you can get.
Yep. An understanding of all of that, how gear works, so that you can capture the best possible sound on the way in.
Yep.
Then
Beautiful.
you've got a mix engineer. So then you've got two different types of mix engineers, one live and one in studio. Live engineers, they're the guys or girls that fucking go out there and make bands sound good live.
They mix your live show for you.
And so they will also have an understanding of a lot of the stuff that I said in the recording engineer part of it, where they know the onstage gear, guitar amps and all that sort of stuff, microphones, how to set them up to get the least amount of noise and the best quality sound coming through the speakers so that the gig sounds really nice.
Yep.
And then you've got the studio mix engineer, who is the person that after it's all been recorded and edited and put together, although they might do a lot of the editing, is making that sound like a finished song. So each element of the track is analysed and cleaned up and made to sound polished and clean and specific to each genre because different genres have different sounds. They will know plugins back to front. They'll know how to use their software really well, that sort of thing.
Yep. And even just for those who I guess aren't music focused who are listening, in each track, each element has so much hours spent making sure that it's the best possible, sonically sounding thing, whether that's the kick, the snare, each cymbal, individual guitars, the vocals, they're all treated separately in the mix and then brought together to make the finished track.
Yep. So when it comes out of the radio speakers or, you're listening to it on Spotify, it's not recorded that way. There's a lot of work done after the recording process to put it all together, to blend it all together, to make it sound like a listenable song so that it's something that you will want to keep listening to.
Yep.
To make your favorite band sound the best that they can.
And I can tell you from someone who has watched mix engineers such as yourself and people online and in other studios, this is one of the biggest skills, and Tony Jack the Bear refers to it as the dark arts of mixing, because it's like the skills and the knowledge that these guys and yourself take into a mix and what they do from what it sounds like coming in to sounds like at the end is a completely different track. Yeah. It's not just, all right, well, let's make sure everything's in the volume. It can be, but most of the time, 99.9% of the time, it's not just volume adjusting.
Yes,
it's
correct.
not going, hey, everything sounds good, you guys nailed it. It's now just, let's make sure things sit at the right volume.
No.
It's the echo on a vocal, how long it sits in there, the tone, like everything that goes down, so much that goes into it.
And then not to say that there's like not so much in a recording engineer's job. It's
100%.
like the exact same attention to detail is required to get something to sound amazing right from the start.
Yep.
But yeah, mixing.
I guess the mixing is the one it's a lot of people don't grasp how detailed it is because you don't physically see it. It's not like, oh, cool, you can physically see these are all different microphones which have a different size diaphragm which are used for different instruments, and when you set them up, you see a drum kit with mics set up and all the leads, and you're like, oh wow, this is impressive. This guy's clearly got skills, he's been doing this for years. You're watching talent in front of you. With mixing, a lot of it is just, it's your ear, it's listening, and it's little 1%ers that make the final product 1,000 times better.
The way I describe mixing is listen, fix, repeat. That's it.
Yep.
Listen, fix, repeat. Listen, fix, repeat. Listen, fix, repeat. Because that's essentially what you're doing.
Well, when you get to a level of competency, 100%. But when you're not there yet, and for people who are, just starting out, it's hard to go through that particular process when you don't know what the finish goal is. Like when your ears haven't been trained and you haven't finished a heap of tracks, you don't know what the finished drum sound should be. So it's not going through and fixing things because you're still experimenting.
Yeah, totally.
You're still learning what it does, and you can just play with knobs and sounds and push it for hours, and you don't know if you're making it better or worse. Like you're just blindly playing with stuff.
Yeah,
and then the
we
last
will get to that though, because I want to expand on that, but not just yet.
And then the last piece of the puzzle is a mastering engineer.
Mastering engineer. So they're the person that takes this finished mixed track and gets the last, 20, 30, 50% of it to get it across that finish line so that it's ready for streaming, for radio. It's a very difficult one to explain, but it's essentially you're taking a finished track and making sure that it is ready for release.
Yep.
You're not doing the release, but you're making sure that the sound of this song sonically is comparable to something that's on the radio or on your major playlists.
And it can translate through different speakers. You can listen to it on huge PA speakers. You can listen to it in earbuds. You can listen to it in your car, on your home hi-fi, and the sound should translate across all of them.
Yeah, it should work on all different ones. Yeah, absolutely.
And the way Tones, just Jack the Bear, described it as, mixing, if you think about it like a picture of a forest, mixing is the different levels of the trees and the details of it, the colours. That when the picture's done, the mastering engineer comes and puts the frame around it for display. They don't go in and play with any of the trees and the road. That's already there. They don't get out the paintbrush at all. They're just putting it in a frame so that it can fucking hang. It can hang in the it's for display. Yep,
absolutely. It's not a bad analogy. I reckon it's a good one. And yeah, it's just you have to, as a mastering engineer, you have to have an understanding of where technology is at currently in terms of how people are listening to it. Because people these days aren't listening to things through a small little shitty radio that sounds like shit. They're listening to them in high quality earbuds or nice speakers, generally speaking. And even in the cars,
cars with
speakers
4 subwoofers and 2 6x9s, like that's way too bass heavy, a sound system that you'd never have in any home. A lot of cars have that.
And you need to have that understanding of how that's going to work. And just a really quick example is if you don't have the right speaker system in the mixing and mastering environment, you will not be able to know how that's going to translate in a car. And so, the understanding of the technology is really important for mastering. Well, because a speaker can only reproduce certain frequencies. So, without going into too much detail, the human ear has a frequency range generally when it's perfect from about 20 hertz to about 20,000 hertz. And so that's a frequency range of a human ear. That's what we can possibly hear at best. Most of the time it's a narrower field, but a speaker can only reproduce a certain frequency range with clarity. And so a small speaker like this will only go down to about 50 hertz. So you're not going to get sub-level frequencies, which is where the real bottom of the kick drum and the bass comes from. So a big PA speaker, you'll be able to hear that because the subwoofer's big enough to reproduce that sound, but a small speaker cannot reproduce it.
This is the Atom A7X he's talking about.
And so you just won't hear that. So you need a subwoofer. We've got a subwoofer down the bottom.
And so I guess essentially, the quality of the speakers and the reason why mastering engineers and mix engineers will have such high quality speakers that they trust is because if you're not hearing the full picture when you're mixing it, how can you mix it accurately when you're not getting all the information there?
And if you get a chance to visit a mastering studio, do it. Jack the Bear is an unbelievable example of the perfect room, the perfect speaker setup. You sit in there, you listen to music. It's an experience, man. It's like you don't hear music that way.
No other room in the country.
Yeah. So if you get a chance to visit a mastering studio that is like top tier, do it. It'll give you such a really big appreciation for the quality and clarity that is required to get it to that last step. Mm-hmm. Sweet. So that's a bit of an explanation about the different types of engineer. And I guess some of the stuff that we wanted to talk about.
Well, let's strip it straight right back. Sorry to jump in there. For those starting out, like the predominantly people listening to this in that first 2 to 3 years, if someone's just starting out, and how a lot of people get exposed to mixing is from coming up, being in a band, recording, say, your first project, and then seeing the engineer then mix it. And then that opens your mind and you're like, wow, holy shit, I did not even know this world existed back here. And that was for me anyway, and I know a lot of people I spoke with at TAFE, that was kind of our first introduction to the world of mixing. And it was going through that recording phase. So if someone, say, have just found out about being a mix engineer and they're just starting to learn about plugins and it's really getting them going and they're really, really enjoying it, what sort of things would you recommend starting out? What's kind of the first steps? How do you go about, I guess, starting to forge a lane as a mix engineer?
First of all, it's educating yourself. I think, you need to have something to be able to work on, right? Like that's obviously a bare minimum. You need a computer. You need a software, DAW, whatever it is, whatever you feel like works for you. I'm not going to tell you what DAW to use because everyone uses different ones and they find different things out of them. Dance music, hip hop, a lot of them use Ableton or Fruity Loops. Whereas for me as a recording engineer and a mixing engineer, I personally use Studio One, but similarities are Logic, that sort of thing, Pro Tools. There's all these different ones. So you need one of them. You need to be able to use that to be able to mix or record music. And then I don't recommend at the start going out there and buying all these extra plugins. Don't spend all your money on all these different plugins and without actually having the knowledge of what the different tools are. EQ, compression, reverb, delay. That's it.
Which
that's not it, but they're the main ones. EQ and compression at a bare minimum to have a really good understanding of those two tools will get you so far.
And all the software comes with a set of those to use before you definitely need to spend any money at all.
And they're good quality, man. Like they're
to an untrained ear, to someone who has never mixed, they are everything you need to be able to start to train your ear.
Correct.
They're all there.
And the actual point of the plugins that come stock with your software, the point of them is to be transparent. They're not supposed to have color. They're not supposed to, this might sound like jargon to someone who doesn't understand it, but they're not supposed to have a very specific sound that colors it a certain way so that it sounds vintage or analog or sounds like it's coming from the 60s or something like that. They're supposed to be transparent, meaning they won't color the sound. If you move a knob plus 3 decibels, it's going to do that. And it's not going to change the sonic characteristic of that sound too much. It's just going to boost 10K, for example, 3 decibels. That's what it's going to do. It won't. So again, this is kind of in depth. It's hard to explain without going into some depth.
100% do, because there'll be people out there that take away from that.
Totally. And so I really recommend making do with some of the basics right at the start. Get a really good understanding of what these tools are, how they work, and practice on as many different sound sources as possible. The best thing that I've been able to do...
When you say sound sources, are you talking about speakers, like listening back on a speaker?
That's a good thing to do, but no, I'm more talking about the actual recording or the tracks that you're working on. So the type of music...
Which I was going to say these days, sorry to jump in there, you can download stems of your favorite tracks from the internet.
Multi-tracks, yep, absolutely.
They're out there for free.
Yep.
Like I remember, man, Tony Jack is getting a mad shout out in this one. Jack the Bear, shout out once again. I remember him and another buddy, Mikey Costa, when they first came up. Mikey was a mix engineer and Tones was a mastering engineer. And they came up together and they used to do that. They used to go and get multi-track stems of tracks. There wasn't the internet, so they had to go and find them from people. And then in the garage, I can't remember if it was out the back of Tones or Mikey's joint, they would do it. Mikey was practicing to be a mix engineer, so he would mix the track how he would, and he'd give it to Tones to master it. And it was like between them, they were learning their skills on songs that they didn't record, songs that they weren't in bands with. It was just go out and find the tracks, and then like these days, go use Google, download your favorite song, it's multi-tracks, and see if you can mix it to get it to sound like that.
Yep,
like
absolutely.
Learn what these plugins do on any track, and you can get them off the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so true. You just need to be able to practice and change this knob that you might not have touched before just to see what it does. The thing is, when you actually come to a point where you're ready to record or mix someone and they're paying you money for it, you should be knowing what you're doing.
100%.
I mean, you got to start somewhere, absolutely, and you'll always continue to get better. But I don't think it's right for you to charge money for something that you're just starting off learning.
Yep.
That's a contentious argument, but
I totally agree with that.
And it's the reason why it's important and why practicing on stuff, as many different things and changing knobs and using different plugins and seeing what they do and stuff like that is important, is so that you can understand, if I need this specific sound, here's how I get it. And when someone's paying you money, that's priceless. Like for you to go, I know exactly what sound this person is after, and just to take 30 seconds and get it done instead of being like, whoa,
let's ask Google.
Let's watch YouTube for 10 minutes. And
exactly. It's like we always talk about the invisible toolbox you have.
Yep.
You need that thing full before you start charging. And this goes for any field, and it's something that I've spoken about before, is people charging for shit they don't know yet. These days on Instagram, through Facebook, the last 2 or 3 years, seems like everyone's turning their role into a personal brand. And it's like people, instead of going on this journey, they take 2 steps, learn something, pat themselves on the back, turn around and try to sell the information they just did to the next person coming. And it does 2 things. 1, it stops your growth. You're never going to get any further. And 2, you're the only people who are going to pay you, say if you're mediocre at something, we'll just use a mix engineer for this example. Say you're a mix engineer and you've been doing it for 2 or 3 years, you're getting somewhat competent, but let's be honest, you're still a lot slower, you've still got a lot of things to do, your ears aren't fully tuned yet, and you decide to start charging people. 1, the only people that are going to pay you are people who think you're really good, or at least at a level to charge from. Now, they're going to be fairly below you. They're not going to be people who know more than you. All of a sudden, just by that one, by financializing it, if that's a word, what you're doing is you're almost creating a little bubble around you of people that aren't very competent and aren't very good at it.
Yeah, because it lowers the quality, overall
the clients
quality
that are paying you are getting a shit mix in return. You're not growing. You're not getting any better. But because you charged for it, there's now an extra layer of, there's a duty of care with it.
Totally. You're doing them a disservice.
You do both people a disservice because
if it's understood, and this is why the money thing is important to talk about, is because if it's understood that, between you and the band, you go, I'm just starting. I just want to try and mix shit. I'll do it for free because I can't guarantee that it'll sound that good.
And just be like, I want to learn. I want to do it. I'll do it for free. It might take a bit longer and you guys might need to give me notes, but I'm open to learn. All of a sudden, just from that, the band's going to get a better result and you're going to upskill yourself.
And I was lucky enough when I was first starting to be in a couple of bands. And also I went to TAFE with my mate Trav, shout out Travie. And we learnt so much together in those first 2 or 3 years. And we were just working on our own music. We did work on other people's tracks, but we weren't charging them, and we weren't, it got to a point where after that 2 or 3 years, when we did have enough of an understanding to get a song to sound releasable, it's like, okay, now I can charge someone. And I wasn't charging an arm and a leg. It was because it was reasonable. It was like, I've only got this much experience, therefore I can only charge that much. And so for me, I was lucky. I mean, when I first started doing music was when I was like, 10, and I actually got my first 4-track recorder when I was about 16 years old, and it was just a tape 4-track recorder. This is how old I am. And, you know, I didn't know what I was doing, but I would hit record and you know, record it and see what came out, and it wasn't any good. But I was doing it, and, you know, the first chance that I had to get some software was some free software by Sony or Sonic Forge, I think they were called at the time. It was Acid, and it was free, and it was a DAW. It doesn't exist anymore, but it did what I needed to, and I, you know, had to understand. I ruined songs with compression. I ruined them with EQ. The drums sounded like shit. The guitars were too harsh. The vocals sucked, but I had to do that stuff to know what not to do next time.
Yeah, that's part of the journey.
That's a huge part of it.
No one ever made a good song without writing fucking 1,000 shit ones
Yep.
or mixing 1,000 shit ones before. You just don't.
Absolutely. So that's the first part is using the technology that's available to you. These days you can get some really affordable, cheap stuff that's decent quality.
Yep.
That you'll be able to have a releasable quality song.
And it'll last you.
It will.
Yep.
Yep. At least a few years until you get better and enough money
to
to
upgrade.
get something better.
Now, you mentioned something in that I want to come back to. You and Schmabby are joining together and mixing together.
Yep.
I think that's another huge step on the journey.
Yep.
Because as we always say in these podcasts, YouTube, Linda, Udemy, these places are awesome and they have got great music resources. However, when there's something like music, which you can't see it, you can't touch it, even just the lingo you're using about coloring it, it's like we've had to come up, and this is not like the music industry has had to come up with lingo to talk about something
boxy
that you can't see, you can't touch. You know, so it's learning the lingo, but also you have to. It's good to have someone to reference with in person, so that when you go and you do your hours every day and every week on your own, off YouTube, learning from dudes like CLA and the greats that have come before us. When you do all that on your own, jump in with someone else and then almost double check your work.
Totally.
Because you never know. When you're learning something new, you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know what bad habits you're forming. You don't know what bad, you don't know if you're going down the wrong path because you haven't done it before.
Yep.
So having that person there, and it could be a friend that you guys are coming up on the same with. It could be someone you know and trust in the industry. You could need to jump on Instagram and DM 50 people to find that person.
Yep.
But I think having an engineer in person to go on this journey with and to bounce ideas off and just talk, explaining.
The thing was for me and Trav was that we love pop punk and punk rock music, and that was where we started, right? And so we had similar music tastes. So we just frothed the same songs that sounded amazing. You know, you'd hear stuff and you'd be like, this sounds phenomenal, and you'd end up finding out it was mixed by Tom Lord Alge or Chris Lord Alge or Eric Valentine or someone like that, and you'd be like, okay, I need to do my research and find out what else they've done. And all of a sudden it opens this world of like the amazing sonics and going, I didn't know they did that. I didn't know they did that. But that was our benchmark for something that sounded amazing. And so when we would work on our own stuff, it's like, how do I do that? No idea. Let's try stuff. And we would give it, sorry for keeping you awake.
No, you're right.
we would send it to each other. We'd be like, here's what I've got of our song, and it'd be like, oh, it sounds kind of cool, but you could do this or you could do that. So we're giving each other feedback.
Yeah.
Even though we were still in the early stages, we still knew what to listen for though. And so there was still that really good, open, honest feedback where the bass is lost. Like where's the bass, or the kick drum sounds this way or something like that. So we would practice and we would just, and that didn't cost anything, giving each other feedback, but it's so important and investment to share what you're doing with people and get feedback.
Yep. None of that, be open to it. Even just going through that process, without you knowing, that would have made you a lot better at being open to feedback about your creative work. Yeah. Because that's something early on, a lot of artists, a lot of producers, a lot of mixed engineers, they'll say like, oh no, they'll all give you something and they back it straight up with like, oh, but this isn't done, or but I didn't get this, or but it's not quite finished yet. And if I had it, then it's like, no. Let's cut all that fucking away. Like,
be vulnerable.
Yeah, correct. Let's just fucking talk about this is where it's at now. Yep. If it wasn't where it's at, it wouldn't be like
I wouldn't give you that feedback. Yeah, exactly. If I didn't have feedback to give you, I would say nothing.
Yeah.
But feedback's so important to keep learning and get better at. I like every time that I send something to a client, even now, in that email, it says, give me feedback about how I've done, because it's so important to me. Like, there's no way to keep learning without having someone that can critique you on something that you've done, because your idea of something is not necessarily right. And it's not necessarily right for your client. And so the way that you want something to sound might not be the way that they want something to sound.
And that's another big lesson in it as well when you start doing it for money. At the end of the day, it's like anyone who works with clients. At the end of the day, we're there to help the client with their project get what they want out of this.
Yeah.
We're just there to assist them with their project.
Yeah.
It's not my project.
Yep.
It's theirs.
Yep.
We're there to use our invisible...
It's a service-based...
Correct. We there for them. Just because they want something that's not creatively how you would have done it, subjectively, there's no right or wrong.
Totally.
Which they're the client. You're there to help facilitate them. And that's one thing...
I honestly believe it's important for you to do things and make things sound different to how you think they should sound in a way.
Yeah.
Like, I'm always challenging myself to use different samples. I don't want to use the same kick drum on every track because I know it's reliable, because it'll sound good at the end. Nope. I want something to sound identifiable.
See, but a lot of engineers don't do that. They'll do the opposite. They find the easy one that sits and they'll and do it again.
Challenge myself to get something to sound different, because there's
a lot of
if there is a time when someone says, I want it to sound like this, I'll be like, I've done that before.
Yeah.
Here's how I did it.
A lot of Melbourne recording engineers would have listened to that, and if it didn't sink in that they need to upskill themselves, then they really should.
Yeah. Yeah. But so that's really important. The other thing is having a mentor, someone that you value their opinion of, because they've done heaps more stuff than you have. And again, they can give you more solid feedback because they have a bigger understanding of what you're trying to do than you do.
How did you find a mentor? Did you have one? Did you have one solid one?
Not really.
Yep.
But I am so tied to YouTube and the greats. The best channel that I can recommend to any recording engineer is Eric Valentine's YouTube channel, because he is so in depth with just how he explains about recording stuff and mixing stuff. But I am such I don't know, man. I just work to make everything better and better and better. I'm very hard on myself as well.
But you also know how to learn at this point.
Yeah.
Like, because, and we've all seen you at the time when you spend online looking tutorials or reading, like you at this point in your career and life, you've learned how to learn.
Yeah.
You know which is going to be bullshit and which shit not to let in, and which is good information that, hey, let me take a mental note because next, like you know that.
To be honest, the feedback that I ask for is probably a lot more than other people potentially ask for.
Yeah.
And so therefore I'm very wanting to know what people's honest opinions are of stuff. And so when I was first starting, I knew I wasn't that good at stuff. So it's like, I just want to get better.
Yep.
And so I didn't have one specific mentor, but all the teachers at TAFE had something to pass on to me. There's still stuff that I remember from some of the teachers that they talked about, subtractive EQ instead of additive EQ, stuff like that.
Yep.
There's all these little pieces of information that I've gathered over the years, that not for one specific person.
Yep.
But if you can find that person, take them. Like,
100. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you this. For people starting out, and I know early on when you're 18, 19, 20, there's usually some sort of pressures from parents to go to school and just being like, hey, man, I want to be in music. Usually for a lot of parents, doesn't quite cut it.
Yep.
For someone who's thinking about going to TAFE to study it, where do you lie on that? Do you think there's value in it? Is it something that a lot of people, to be honest, even when I saw a lot of people do it to please their parents, a lot of 18-year-olds be like, well, I'm still studying, so they go back to school. Where do you stand on that, on going back to, say, a formal TAFE to educate? I
think there's value in it for sure. To me, it's about knowing what you want to get out of it. And I was always a little bit lost. I don't think it's pretty much well known now that the human brain doesn't fully develop until you're about 25. So all of the formal education that I received was when I was under 25. And so I don't think I had that understanding of what I was doing at that time. And I went through a whole bunch of different, like I started off at photography school and then I did media at Deakin. And then I eventually landed on going to NMIT, doing that part-time for 1 year. And then I did it full-time for 2 years, which meant repeating the part-time first year because it's supposed to be a 2-year thing to go into a one. Anyway, I did that. And you know, I kind of regularly felt like that was a waste of time. But upon reflection now, not only I met Trav and, you know, he's one of my best mates now, and we did so much together. We played in bands together. Like I've talked about, we learnt sound together. We just did it relentlessly. But there's absolutely knowledge to be gained from going to school. It's about knowing what you want to get out of it. And I think I couldn't see myself spending over 10 grand to go to a specific school because that school's the best in.
Yeah.
These days, I can't see that's good.
Yep.
Unless you're just given that money. But even still, use that money to buy some good gear.
Yeah.
Like, I
agree. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I went back and studied sound production when I was 25. And that was the only time I just did it for 1 year, whatever the one is. Diploma or whatever.
Yep.
And went through and got fucking high distinctions on everything. I was like, it's like school had always come easy to me, but I just never liked it. It was never my lane. I didn't want to do it. I didn't see the value in it.
Yep.
It was just a race I didn't want to be in.
Yep.
But going back to, and this was TAFE NMIT,
as well,
I got a lot out of it. But at the same time, I'd been doing it for 5 years before I went back to school.
Yeah.
So I think for the people, 18-year-olds that say they use that course to get into it, I think that may be the wrong time to use something like TAFE.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think you have the awareness of what you want to do.
You won't
at that
pick
point.
it up. Like you need to go out and play gigs first and mix. Like we'd mixed all our stuff and produced all our stuff for 5 years before I went back and learnt about the physical properties of a sine wave and how that affects your mixing.
Yeah.
Like you should almost be doing this stuff without knowing why you do it. You do it because it sounds right.
Yeah.
And then you go back and learn and you're like, oh, that makes sense why I do that.
It's an interesting point because some of that stuff like that, the physical properties of sound and stuff like that is kind of some of the stuff that stuck with me the most. In terms of mixing and recording, there's no way I believe that you can learn that without actually doing it.
Yep.
There's no way. It's the sort of thing that it's not possible to learn it. And so the reason why me and Trav are still doing it now, I believe, is because we worked so hard on our extracurricular stuff.
Yep,
you know,
100%.
Not the stuff that we were recording at TAFE. Take it or leave it. It's fine.
Yep.
And we did it, but it wasn't the focus.
It's not going to get you there. It won't get you
can't.
the whole way.
Yeah.
I agree. And I'll even go one step further and I'll say if you're just starting out, you can't get good at it in a year. 1 year
no way.
is not enough time for you to fully understand what it is.
Minimum of 5.
So I would say then even on that journey, if you're thinking about spending money to upskill yourself at TAFE, say you just want to go back for a year of knowledge.
Yep.
If you're going to be on this 5, 6, 7 year journey, I don't think the appropriate time to spend the money is on year one. Because you can only get so, it doesn't matter what they tell you, you're not going to be able to take it all.
Yep.
You're better off going learning on your own, spend a year talking to people, find out about the internet, fuck up your mixes, learn what a compressor does.
And the other thing is, I think because music's so subjective, the way that they teach you at schools is so broad. And so if you don't vibe with the teacher or the style of music that you have to mix or the software that they're using at the TAFE, you're going to probably hate it.
Yep.
And you're going to think that school's a waste of time. It's not. You're just not in the right place.
Yeah.
And so that's really important too.
Definitely.
And I've seen it. I've heard firsthand accounts of they're teaching me Pro Tools and it's the worst. I fucking hate it. It's like, no shit, because that doesn't gel with you because music is subjective. It's how you use it.
Yep.
It's how you use the tools that you understand to get the end product. The actual tool doesn't matter.
That's good advice.
Let me see if there's go on.
Even on TAFE teachers, like some TAFE teachers are the best sources and resources of information you'll meet. They love it. They've been doing it all their life. and they just honestly want to pass on information.
Yep.
And it's amazing. There are dudes that I still talk with now, and it's like that.
Yep.
There are also TAFE teachers who, let's be honest, are jaded and hate the fucking industry and the fact that their band never made it, so they went and taught it to TAFE.
Or they've gone straight into teaching as soon as they've graduated, because some people can do that. Like you can go straight into a teaching role straight after you've graduated, have no real world experience.
Yeah, that's nonsense. You got to get into it.
But that happens though. There's those teachers that exist that actually don't know what they're talking about.
And they make it a lot harder when you don't know what you want to get out of. If you're in your first year and you've got a super jaded teacher who's miserable and he's teaching, maybe the right shit, but he's not keen on it. You don't give a shit because he doesn't give a shit. It's like, that's not going to be the best place for someone starting out to grow. And even like live performance, I remember day one of TAFE when we went in, live performance, the dude teaching us live performance had supported me the day before at St Kilda Fest. He's like, he opened the stage for us. I went to first day of class the next day. He's like, I'll be teaching you live performance. And I'm like, you just opened for me yesterday.
So, I've got a funny story as well. And so I did that first year part-time at TAFE. I had the teachers that I had, and I was like, this is fine. I was like kind of learning stuff. I was able to use software, which was cool. That was a lot of fun. We had access to the recording studio. Guess what happened second year of my full-time? I was in there as a tutor.
You were teaching the other dudes.
I was tutoring. So I was supporting the teacher. And one of the kids that I was helping with EQ, even then I feel like I had not much of an understanding of it. But that kid was like, this is way more than I've learned all year. And that was like halfway through the year. And so it's like, even at that point, I was getting that from that person. So it's like, I know that I have a natural ability at it. This is what I'm good at.
Yep.
But I've honed it over so many years.
Yeah.
So that even at that point, it was like, I'm already learning more from you. Not experienced. I don't
100%.
know. That's kind of funny.
Definitely. And it just shows it's like, and as soon as you get removed from the schooling institution, it all means nothing.
Correct.
What that fucking piece of paper said, I can tell you, no one in the industry has asked what scores I got on that fucking thing. No one gives a shit.
No.
So it's good to upskill yourself and know that you need to get better in this environment, but also know like as soon as you walk out in that last day, it means nothing. It's what your invisible toolkit that you've built along the way with all the resources the school was meant to give you.
And this is why knowing what you want out of it is really important, because if you don't know what you want, you're sitting in every class just getting information and it's not sticking because you're not fascinated about it. You don't actually want to learn about it. You just think that it's something that you should know.
Yeah.
And so if everything is that, then nothing's sinking in. And so if you know what you want to get out of it, if that is specifically how to use a mixing console, pay attention at the part where they're teaching you how to use a mixing console.
And you'll ask questions.
And you'll remember.
Yep. When you don't fully get it, it's like poke holes. I always think about it as like poking holes in what the teacher said.
Yeah.
If I didn't understand something, I'd ask all these questions and someone would be completely stupid.
Yep.
But to me, it's like I had to poke a hole in everything for him to explain it. And then I got the full picture.
Yeah.
And then it was almost, oh man, the penny drops. I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
Because I've asked all these questions like, what about this? And then if this does it, and then this. And once I had all that information, then I was like, oh man, I get it. Cool.
I think the other flaw is that even if that teacher is really doing their best sincerely and they do know stuff, they're still human. So they're still not going to get everything right.
True.
And so you can't know that answer is incorrect until you try it yourself anyway. So practice, man. It's like practice. Like honestly, make do with what you've got, learn the shit out of it, practice different stuff.
Yep.
And just get good at doing what you do. Don't keep trying to introduce new shit.
Yeah.
Get good at what you do and then learn something else.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to know when you know something. Like you said, you don't know what you don't know, but you also sometimes don't know what you do know. And so just keep learning, man.
Just do it is the
practicing.
biggest takeaway for people, for any up-and-coming mixed engineers.
Yep.
Yeah, make do with what you've got. You don't need the biggest plugin collection in the world. Hell, you don't even need Waves, which is the first set of group of plugins most people will talk about and buy.
Yeah, these days maybe not so much.
No,
but
really? That was it back when I was there.
their business model's fucked.
Oh, really?
Seriously, But if they want to give me free plugins, they can.
Well, always. But make do with what you've got. Learn what a compressor does. Like that. I remember that was one thing that
EQ and compression.
Hey man, can you explain to me what a compressor does? And if you can't explain it thoroughly, you don't really know what it does. So learn it.
Yep.
And then just go and mix. Like use the internet, download the stems of your favorite tracks, sit till your eyes bleed on that screen, and then mix them, give them to a friend, go, hey, what's your honest feedback? Does this sound like a complete steaming pile of garbage? Or does this sound listenable? Give it to music friends. Show it to someone. If you can get to a point where you show someone a track and they don't pick up that you've mixed it, you're getting good now. You're starting to get there.
And like, I inbox me. I'm not the best at what I do. I do this every day though. And so I know what I need to listen for. I am very, very happy to give anyone mixed feedback. Send it through to me. Inbox me on Instagram.
Stu What's Audio.
I'm happy to do that.
Or through the Marshall Street and just request for Stu or the engineer. It'll go straight through to him. I think that's some awesome advice there. Any other takeaways?
I think we've covered a lot.
I think we've done it. Pretty much just get out there and mix. Like, you know,
and just use the people around you. Like use people, like you said, ask for advice. Use the technology that's available to you. What we were gonna say is find 2 or 3 online sources that you really value and that you believe give you really good information. What I would say is try and avoid anyone on YouTube that says, I do this in every mix. Avoid that. Don't listen to them. Every song is different. It should be. If you're doing everything the same way,
that's a red flag.
I think that you need to reevaluate what you're doing. And so,
but that's a great point. Like, because there is so many different resources, and because it's something you can't see or touch, early on it can be confusing knowing which information to listen to. So instead of trying to pull bits from everyone on YouTube that gives out mix info, find 2 or 3 of people and look at their back catalog, see what their resume is, but then just stick to them.
I mean, there's some great. Nail the Mix is a really good one for heavy music. If you love heavy music and you love mixing, Nail the Mix is a really great resource. Our boy Sam Guayana's been on it.
Oh, has he?
Yeah, a couple of times. I've watched his stuff. It's unreal. There's heaps. There's free stuff on YouTube and stuff, but I mean, if you want to pay a little bit of money and get some really good stuff, Nail the Mix is great. And
there is also some golden ears. Masters. There's some golden ears tests. I remember that we were doing back in the day, which would, again, just test your ears. It'd show you an A/B test.
What frequency is this?
Where's the compressor? Has there been a compressor on this? Can you pick up on that?
It's good stuff.
So there's heaps of good resources. I think we've pretty much covered it. Shall we wrap this one up?
Absolutely.
As always, if this information has been useful or you think it would be useful to a friend who wants to get into the industry, share it with them. Post it on your show socials. Make sure to like and follow us. And
any questions you might have, inbox us.
Send us to the inbox, and we will see you on the next episode of the Marshall Street Podcast. Peace.